Hello, welcome to TGIK at an all new time. It's 9 a.m. GMT. This is TGIK Europe. Joining me today is Anusha. Today we're going to be talking about Cluster API once again. You know what it is whenever I appear here, we're talking Cluster API. So, Anusha, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, I'm Anusha. I'm a software engineer at VMware, and I've been involved with the Bring Your Own Host, which is today's topic, for quite a few months now. Yep, that's it about me.
That's myself. So, first things first, let's get up the notes. So we are in here. The notes are, as ever, it's free for everyone to join in. So I can figure out how to use chat again. Hi, Scott. Hi, Ian. Nice to see you, as ever. Yeah, so if you want, that should work. So there's the link to the notes. Do follow along. If anyone wants to take notes as well, that'd be great. Yeah, so let's go through our usual stuff. So we'll have a look at the news. So, I mean, happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the US. So it's relatively quiet. What has been happening is Kubernetes 123 is continuing to be worked on, and the beta is out. So I just picked out some of the things that interested me. Start off with the easy one. So as everyone's probably tired of knowing that I work on AWS and Cluster API AWS, so I was intrigued to find out that CSI is finally on by default for AWS and GCE from V123. The long-awaited migration of cloud providers out of the Kubernetes tree is coming up. So that's the history behind that is there's a lot of cloud provider code in the Kubernetes repository, and basically want to pull that out, reduce the millions of lines of dependencies that are pulled into Kubernetes by moving the cloud provider integrations externally. So that's finally happening. It's been long delayed, so that's one thing that's happened. Interestingly, CRI v1 is now the default. This one kind of shocked me last year when I was looking at it. Like, container runtime was still on v1 alpha 2, and given that Kubernetes has been out for ages. So we're only just moving to v1 on CRI, which is cool. I'm just going to shut down Slack. Just give me a second. There we go. Don't want any notifications while we're on this. I don't know if anyone's familiar with what the differences are in CRI. Does anyone know? If anyone, but I think it's good. Less reliance on alpha and beta stuff in the Kubernetes ecosystem is great. Those of you using kubectl, in your if you're doing automation through shell scripts and things, then there's a feature been added that you can use kubectl wait on JSON paths. So that's if you don't want to write your own Kubernetes controller, you don't want to write Go particularly, then use shelling out to kubectl, and then waiting on JSON paths might be something you wanted to do. So you can wait on the particular conditions to happen and then move on. And finally, this one's pretty interesting. Let me share. I've not been sharing my screen, have I? There we go. So, validation rules for custom resource definitions using the cell expression language. So those of you who are writing Kubernetes controllers, you'll probably find that your validation webhooks, you basically have to write a lot of validation webhooks today. So because the amount of validations you can do within the Open API specification inside the CRD is very minimal. So there's this new feature that's been introduced. There was an example. It's a pretty good example. Yeah, here we go. So you can do more complex values, more complex checks inside the Kubernetes API, which means you don't have to write your own custom webhook. So this is very alpha at the moment. Scott goes, yeah, another validation language. Yeah, I mean, we love adding them. Not. When is too many? You know, it doesn't matter. Yeah, more programming inside YAML. I love that as well. That's also good to see. So, why joke? So yeah, you could. Yeah, this is stuff you really could not do just with Open API validation alone. So this is very beta at the moment. This is a sort of follow on to. There was a proposal a couple of months ago around replacing the entire way you write CRDs with something that is CL based. That didn't make its way through, but small incremental changes like this have. So we'll see where this goes. There's some caveats around using it. If you're interested, have a look at the PR. Those are the things I've picked out for this release, and I should click on the right screen, that would help. And as ever, I was just going through what's happening in the ecosystem. We have a couple of projects that have been accepted for the sandbox in the CNCF. First of all, is this Kubernetes OpenShift backup operator? Not really. I have seen this floating around before, but it's a sort of backup system for Kubernetes based on RESTIC. So similar, I guess, to Velero, for those who've used it. So yeah, so I think it's and also it's doing some of the same things as Velero does, and yeah, uses RESTIC, which are S3 compatible, so you can back up volumes to like S3 compatible storage. So that might be something we might want to try out at some point on a future episode. We'll see. And also KubeRS, and that is exactly what you think it might be. So Rust, Kubernetes client and controller runtime. Hi Damjet. Question from Saman. So does this validation overwrite existing OPA policies in the cluster? Oh, right. This is their CEL. No, it does not. So this is the CEL validation rules are for CRD authors. So this is, say, you're writing an Kubernetes-based application, and you want to validate the input that's coming in from the user. Like, I don't know, like, you're saying Cluster API, someone tries to create a VM with -50 gigabytes RAM. Now, technically, you can do that through an Open API validation. That's obviously incorrect. So, say you didn't have that feature, then you could use a CEL language to do that. OPA is something I think is very much for your cluster operator or your security people to add additional business rules that are specific to the organization. The only exception is say your platform engineering team and you're writing your own controllers. You might have your Acme Corp deployment CRD or something, and you might be using OPA today to do the validation. Then yes, this would be a replacement. Cool, thanks, David. Yeah, thanks you two for pointing me here. A bring your own host provider is very interesting. You're streaming at EU friendly time. Yes, it's good to be awake for once. All right. Yeah, so that's the news. If anyone's got anything else they think has been interesting this week, post it in the links in the chat. Otherwise, let's get going with the show. All right. So, bring your own host. Not sure if everyone knows what that means in terms of a Cluster API process. So we're not going to talk in the basics of Cluster API. We've done this plenty of times on TGIK, and I will post links to all the previously on TGIK later. So I think we just want to talk about what does bring your own host mean in the context of Cluster API, Anusha?
Yep. So basically, why bring your own host, right? So we call the bring your own host provider as something for your already existing hosts. So what are these already existing hosts? Now, say suppose you're on an infrastructure stack of AWS, Azure, GCP, anything, right? Or you could be using ESXi for your virtualization layer, or it could be on Hyper-V. So you are in a specific infrastructure and setting, and you want to deploy Kubernetes clusters. Now, of course, you can do it severally. You could do it on your own, but then the lifecycle management headache would be on you. That's where all the awesome project like Cluster API comes into picture. So it has simplified to a great extent of how you can manage the lifecycle of all these Kubernetes clusters. Um, and for your different infrastructure needs, like if you have AWS, we have a Cluster API provider for AWS. For vSphere, we have CAPI for vSphere. Similarly, for a lot other infrastructure providers, the list is long, but it's also not exhaustive, right? Like one example I can think of is Hyper-V. So there's no Cluster API provider for Hyper-V. So now what do? Like you have Hyper-V, but you want to deploy Kubernetes clusters, and you also want to leverage all the goodness of Cluster API. So how do you do it? So this is where the bring your own host comes into picture. So using the bring your own host provider, if you have hosts that are running on Hyper-V, like probably you could have Hyper-V VMs, you can have Kubernetes node bootstrapped out of these VMs, and then you can form a Kubernetes cluster. I don't want to wave my hands too much, so I have one diagram probably I can show you all. I'm going to share my screen. One sec. Yeah, I am sharing. Yes. So this diagram is okay. We have our bring your own host provider repository on GitHub. Probably we can share the link in the show notes as well. But this diagram is yet to make its way to GitHub. So maybe a few weeks delay until you see this diagram out there. So basically, for those of you aware of what Cluster API is and what different providers do, and Naadir, probably you can keep me honest here. So whenever we want to create a cluster based on AWS or vSphere, Azure, anything. So Cluster API has this concepts of creating machine deployments, machine sets. It has different controllers that continuously reconcile the current state to the desired state, right? Now, suppose say you want to create a AWS cluster, a simple AWS cluster with one control plane node and one worker node. So essentially, these are two machines. So you'd need two VMs or two EC2 machines for this. So since we are taking the example of AWS cluster, let's take AWS Cluster API provider. So whenever there's a request for a control plane machine or a worker node machine, the first thing the controller does is look at how many machines are requested. Now, for control plane, it has requested for one machine. So that's the desired state, and the current state is 0. So it goes and provisions the hardware for it. That is, it spins up EC2 machines, or in case of vSphere, it spins up vSphere VMs. And then we have these OVAs or AMIs that are published, that for a given Kubernetes version and for a given OS, we use the image builder project to bake all these Kubernetes binaries into the OVA or AMI itself, right? So VMs are deployed out of these templates. And then finally, the Kubernetes node part, wherein I think Kubedium is kind of widely used bootstrap provider. So based on the bootstrap provider, you either execute Kubedium commands or whatever bootstrap provider you're using, and then you get Kubernetes node out of it. This node now can join the cluster. So this is what typically a Cluster API infrastructure provider does, right from provisioning your hardware to OS to having Kubernetes binaries, and then finally bootstrapping the node. But what is the basic difference with BYOH and rest of the providers is this. On the right side, you can see the hardware and OS is user managed. That is, you bring the hardware, you install the OS, whatever security patches are there, whatever OS upgrades are there, the user has the freedom to do it as per their choice. But what the bring your own host provider does is, given a Kubernetes version, we will install all those binaries. And then finally, we also use the Kubedium bootstrap provider. So we use the Kubedium provider to bootstrap into a Kubernetes node. So essentially, if you see, this is a two-step process wherein you have a host provisioning step, where that is the hardware plus OS. And then there is the node provisioning step, that is the Kubernetes package and the node. So with Bring Your Own Host Provider, we have decoupled this uh, two steps. That is, you do the host provisioning and we will do the node provisioning for you. Um, and another, I think, interesting tidbit is that Cluster API has the machine immutability concept, wherein which means like if you want new machines, if you want to create new machines, or if you want to scale your cluster, all this hardware is created on the fly. The hardware, as in, could be VMs or EC2 machines. These are spun up on as requested. Similarly, when you want to scale down your cluster or you want to delete your cluster altogether, these VMs are simply deleted. They are thrown away. But that is not the case in Bring Your Own Host. So we cannot say that, okay, I need to scale down this host. It's discarded. It's not discarded. Instead, whatever Kubernetes binaries that we are installing, whatever modifications we are making to the host, we do a, I want to air quote it, best effort cleanup of your host, and try to return back to whatever state it was initially, so that you can reuse this host maybe as part of another cluster where it could be taking on a different Kubernetes version, or you could completely rip it down and install new OS. Basically, you can reuse your hardware. So this is where we are slightly deviating from the machine immutability concept. This is like the basic difference between BYOH and rest of the providers. Nadir, do you want to like add something else, or?
No, that's great. That's perfect. So we've got some questions in chat. So first one was vSphere related. So it was a question around vSphere needing DRS, and the answer is yes, it does. We're not recreating DRS in Cat-V because that'd be too complicated, and many hundreds of years of engineering. Question from Sinan: does Bring Your Own Host extend for edge or IoT use cases as well, since the OS footprint required is minimal?
Yep, good question. I will get to it. Um, so yeah, again, I have like another beautiful, simple diagram. I'm
Nice.
just going to throw it in here. So this is what BYOH is as of today. We will see all of this in detail probably during a hands-on, when we do a hands-on of BYOH provider. But I just want to give an understanding of where each component lies when it comes to BYOH provider. So yes, we are a cluster API provider, so we have something called a management cluster and a workload cluster. So the line that I've drawn here, the white line that you see horizontal, divides this into two spaces. One is the management cluster. Now this management cluster has to reside in a data center, or it has to be powered by one of the existing infrastructure providers. That is to say, your management cluster should be on either vSphere, AWS, Azure, anything, because we still don't have the capability of bringing up a management cluster solely out of BYO hosts. So that is like one constraint we have as of today. So, and this is in a data center. And now comes the interesting part where the workload clusters are present. Now, these workload clusters are BYOH clusters. That is, all the nodes, the control plane nodes and the worker nodes, are bootstrapped from BYO hosts. And now this could be, I want to say it as a BYOH site, because this could be, again, a data center wherein you have some spare capacity, you have some just servers lying around and you want to deploy Kubernetes on it. Or it could be a retail store outlet where you do have some amount of beefy servers, but in a limited amount. It could be edge use case, like wherein not, I would not say IoT, because those are like very limited hardware, since we are still using kubeadm for bootstrapping the node. So whatever prerequisites is mandated by a kubeadm bootstrapping process, uh, uh, I'm not very sure of the number, something like, I think, 2 CPU or 4 vCPU, whatever kubeadm mandates, that is required. So if we consider edge in terms of thick, medium, and thin edge, so probably I can say this suits well for thick and medium edge as of today, just because of the amount of space that is needed to bring these clusters up. Otherwise, even though if you're successful in bringing this up in an IoT device, you wouldn't have much room left for your actual applications to run. The cluster itself will take a lot of space. So that hopefully answers Suman's question. Like, yes, you can extend it as long as you have the capacity. One interesting, takeaway from this diagram I want to call out is the host agent. So the host agent is the component that does quite a bit of magic on the host side. So uh, this is a binary so that you'll have to install on your host, and given some credentials to it, that is how to reach to the management cluster. It will register itself as a BYO host saying, hey, I'm available, I'm up, I'm running, I'm available to be bootstrapped as a Kubernetes node. So if we consider something as a BYO host capacity pool, we can say a host has registered itself into the capacity pool. So similarly, say if you have 10 hosts, you run host agent on all of these, and they will register themselves as available capacity. So now they're just lying around there. There's no action going on. But once you apply a cluster template, like you want to create a workload cluster with one control plane node and three worker nodes, that's where the BYOH infra, that is in the management cluster, the green box that you see. So this is our BYOH infrastructure provider that is installed in the management cluster. So this starts the reconciliation process. First, the control plane node, obviously. So it looks for, okay, I need one control plane node. It means I need to claim one host. So it looks at the available host capacity pool. Are there any hosts available? Yes, if there is, it then starts the bootstrap process. Now, we'll see more how the host agent installs Kubernetes binaries and then bootstraps into Kubernetes node. Maybe for now, we can say that, okay, now the host agent bootstrapped it into a node. Next, we have the control worker node request. Since I had requested for three worker nodes, it says, okay, are there three available capacity in my capacity pool? If there is, it goes ahead, bootstrap those hosts also as Kubernetes node. If suppose say you had registered only two hosts and you are requesting for a three node cluster, then definitely you're short of one machine, right? And this is not something it creates on the fly. It is something you register it beforehand. Then it means that your cluster will kind of get stuck in a provisioning status where it is just looking for available hosts in the capacity pool. So you can create as many workload clusters in your uh, remote location as possible. It it all depends on how many hosts you can spare for those worker nodes. Yep, these are like the main components of what a device provider has. We can get into more depth like as and when we do a hands-on. I guess that would be more clear.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we can probably go to my attempt at trying to get this working in a minute. Just one question from Scott. Do upgrades require new nodes, or is it an in-place upgrade? So how would you do an upgrade of a Kubernetes version in this environment?
Yeah. So at the moment, like even Cluster API, I assume does not support in-place upgrades, right?
No.
So similarly, for now, we don't support that yet, but it could be possible because the very essence of BYOH provider is we are decoupling the host provisioning from node provisioning. So yes, we are already deviating from an immutable machine concept. So yes, that could be possible, but we are not supporting it as of now. So right now, an upgrade would mean you scale down a cluster, which means we uninstall all the Kubernetes things that we had installed. The host goes back into the capacity pool, and the next time you have to pick up another host and install new Kubernetes versions on it. So it could be any different host that you're picking up, and then you cannot say, "Bring me back the same host that I had." So basically, there's no in-place upgrade as of now.
Okay, that's cool. And I think there are two more questions, but I think it might make more sense to actually just do it. And I think it should answer the questions as go along. So let's have a look at my crazy attempt. So people might know from previous episodes, I do have a vSphere lab at home because I'm very silly. So what we got today, so it's simpler than last time than when we were doing KubeRip and Tinkerbell. If people were familiar with what happened last time when I was doing KubeRip, I struggled to get lots of things working it turned out I had mislabeled one of the VLANs on my network. So that's all gone. We're all using just my single server subnet, because that's we don't need anything else for this demo. We're not doing anything with BGP, for instance, this time round. So what have we got today? So we've got a machine which I've called. I did create these folders. Always get yeah. So right, TGIK. There we go. There we go. At the moment, you can ignore that Fedora range. We might play with that later. See what happens. So I've got a machine that's off. That's called Ubuntu 2004 template. I'm just actually going to turn it on for a second. Oh, I need my keys. Hold on. Give me a second, because I need my UB key. So give me a moment.
Yeah, so Scott, you're asking that is there a way to select which nodes will be selected? No, at the moment you cannot select which nodes. So all the hosts that you register are going to be treated equally. But yes, that is a very good, idea. As in, if you want to assign beefier hosts to control plane nodes, that makes like perfect sense. But at the moment, all the hosts are treated equally.
Thanks. And as Keith says, it's not DNS, it's VLAN. It's either that or MTE, right? So those are the one of the three things we ever see. So I believe this machine, I think if I check that, so I had to do this super hacky. So specifically did not use Cluster API to start off with. These are all this stuff started life as just Ubuntu that I installed. So no cheating in these regards. So I have a VM. I basically installed Ubuntu from an ISO yesterday. Oh, and as Keith says, are the big problems at NTP? Yes, NTP. Keep your time in sync, because it's very important in Kubernetes. Please. Right. So on this machine, what have I done? So I did apt-get upgrade, obviously, and still I missed some updates yesterday, so 8 missing. So if we look at this machine, we do not have kubelet, we don't have kubectl, we do not have kubeadm, so we don't have none of those things. Do we have Docker? No. Do we have? Don't have quite CRI, CTL. Let's have a look at the list of services. So it's very plain install, apart from some things I hacked around to make it work later. So it's a very default install. It's basically just running OpenSSH. What I have done is I have turned off the swap beforehand. There's a couple of I can't remember now. Did we do any sysctls? No. etc mod probe. So there's stuff that you would normally do for kubeadm. I think we'll see this on the other machine that I've got. So there's nothing special around here.
And probably ports like 6443 should be exposed.
I do not have the
Like
firewall.
firewall or no.
Yeah, there's no firewall on any of this, so that's a good shout. So I don't have UFW install, so it's just the minimal Ubuntu server install, and I think by default you don't get the firewall. It's only with the workstation one. Don't know. I don't use Fedora, Ubuntu much. I'm a Fedora guy, not in the literal Fedora wearing weirdo sense, just Fedora in terms of Fedora Linux. Let's be clear here. So what we have done on this, I have previously downloaded the Bring Your Own Host agent. So that's going to be, I think if we go to our Getting Started guide, we basically have a requirement to do that. Yeah, so download the on the host, download it, run it. So in these instructions, so you can do this, you don't need to do, you could literally just run this on the machine. So if I did that now, it's going to error, right? Because I haven't set up. You need to give it a kube config. So this might explain what some of the communications that might happen. Well, at least it will in a minute. And there is one other thing I've dropped on this. Did I drop it on here? Yes. There is a kube config, which is going to be used by this host agent pointing at this address, which is this VM here, case management TGIK. So this is a single node Kubernetes cluster. Didn't use Cluster API for this. This is just
I think there's a question by Vishal, right? So BYOH agent would need access to the management cluster by kubeconfig. Yes. So
yes.
you have to provide the IP that it can talk to, the control plane. How does it work? Because it has to be on the same network. So you have to be either on the same, it could be a private or public, doesn't matter, but the IP has to be reachable from this VM.
And I guess that's why at the moment you can't actually provision a management cluster from bring your own host, because the way most people are doing that sort of day zero bootstrap of Cluster API, so you're doing it from Minikube, you're doing it from client, where you need, unless you're putting your laptop on the internet or something, which I guess you could do using one of those reverse proxy tunnels, I suppose. You then need to hack about with TLS certificates. That gets pretty difficult pretty quickly. So that's why for this environment, I provisioned a one node management cluster somewhere else. So on this machine, this one does have, this is just normal kubeadm build. So what do we have on this? We've got don't have anything installed. I think it's barely just running. So it's standard kubeadm deploy, and then Antra as a CNI. So that's what we got here. This one, I did initially clone this from the other template, and then I ran into some issues with. If you didn't know, if you're not using Cluster API to provision VMs and you're not using cloud in it or stuff, I did run into a problem where all my machines ended up with the same IP address, despite the MAC address being different. It turns out, at least on Ubuntu, that net plan, this default config, it actually uses the systemd machine ID as the unique identifier it sends to the DHCP server, which doesn't, because I didn't use cloud in it. Yeah, Scott goes, Ubuntu uses the machine ID. So if I'm cloning a VM, Ubuntu VM, even if I change the MAC address, it keeps sending the same ID to the DHCP server, so it ends up with the same address. So the other thing I have changed in that template.
I think I did run into this issue, like
Yeah.
where any number of VMs I clone, and then I realized the IPs were the same. You mentioned it right. It sends the same ID to DHCP. I remember reading about this being a known issue or something.
Yeah, so the way around it, so you can reset the machine ID and
Okay.
Is it hostname CTL or system CTL? One of those. But the other solution is if you just add this to the net plan, DHCP identify MAC, it will force it to use the MAC address, and then it doesn't matter if they're the same. I think in a production environment, you should make them different, but for purposes of this does what we want. Right, so that's all we got. So we don't have any other VMs. Yes, Scott said you should always delete the machine ID before cloning the template. That is true, but also I was doing this last night, so you should use Packer or something like that and have some cleanup scripts. I think is the real answer to any of this, not just like copy all your logs around and even to the extent of having the same SSH key on all the hosts. So this is all bad. Do not do this in production, please. But for the purposes of us hacking around today, this is fine. So what do we have else? So we need to get some VMs that we're going to use to bring in our own host. Absolutely do not want to register Ubuntu template. So we're going to clone this. I have not used this before, so this is a new thing. This is me copy and pasting from Ansible's docs. So find some VMs. So we are using the VMware plugin for Ansible, and we're going to clone my Ubuntu 2004 template. I have a snapshot, so we're going to use link clones because it's faster, and we're going to power on some machines, and we're going to call it that. So let's hopefully this works. I almost certainly do not have on this machine, so I was doing this on my laptop. So anyone can remember what the Python module? Oh, yeah, cool. Okay, fine. I think that's it. We'll find out. Yeah, so what else have we got? Sorry, we have, I've got an environment variable, so I do have my vSphere credentials and that. Do not do this in production, that's bad. But that works. So we're going to use the VMware VM inventory in a bit. We don't actually have the VMs yet. And then we're just going to first clone these. Hopefully that works. No, because what have I missed?
PyVim.
Oh.
Get rid of the install PyVim, I guess.
Oh, what? Oh, I'm using... I'm using the wrong Python. Oh no. I think that has done it. Okay, so we are cloning some VMs now. As it's linked clones, they're pretty quick. So we're going to have 4 VMs. So actually, in terms of other bits, they're doing 2 CPUs because kubeadm has a hard requirement on having two vCPUs at the moment. I'm not sure what the history behind that is. You can force it to skip it, but for some reason today there's a hard requirement around having 2 CPUs.
It's part of the pre-flight kubeadm check. Right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure why it's part of the pre-flight. Like, what was the reason behind that? It might have been, I suspect, in the past, some race conditions in the Go runtime in various bits of Kubernetes. And maybe as a workaround, they just said you had to have 2 vCPUs, so you didn't see the problem. Probably sounds like... So maybe we should get rid of it at some point, or maybe revisit that. But you can turn it off. You can turn off the pre-flight check. So, yeah. So, so these all come up. Because we have that hack in the net plan, we actually have them on different IPs, which is good. It's what we want. These are IPv6. We are not using IPv6 here, but it will work. You can attempt to connect to here if you want to own me, but these are firewalled, I hope. I'm pretty certain they're firewalled, so you will not be able to access it directly. Yeah, I also have not changed my password for vCenter since the last time we did this, and I showed it on screen. Yeah, if you get on here, good luck. I don't have anything important in here. This is purely a demo environment. I guess you'll pop onto my home network, which would be bad, I suppose. Anyway. One for the Cluster API security audit. Someone can have a go at me about that later. Right. So if we pop onto these machines, though, they all have the same DNS name, which is bad. For later, they're all still called Ubuntu template. So for ignore all the man in the middle errors. That's all fine. Don't care. They all have the same SSH host key as well. So these are all Ubuntu template. We need to fix that. So I could change that manually, right? So I could do hostname CTL, set hostname, blah, 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 blah. And then I think the other requirement, because bits of Kubernetes use it. Scott says he's going to let Pushkar know that I'm not changing my passwords. Good. Thanks. Those that don't know, Pushkar sits on CNCF SIG security, and is helping us out with doing our security audit for Cluster API. So we need to change this. This is another thing from the quick start. One thing I did, I don't know if it's important. I kept the 12011 and changed only that one. I didn't add an entry 127001. Does that make a difference? It seemed to work for me.
Yeah, it works. I think it can be anything in the 127.00 range.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So if we go back to VS Code, so we have another thing that's happened. Oh, yes. Yeah, so the next thing we do is, so we're going to just hack the host file. We're going to set the host name, and we are going to start this bring your own host systemd unit on that unit. So I did notice one thing about that. Yeah, so I've got this config. I had to put restart always on that, because one thing we'll see in a minute, but there's probably a little minor bug in this. It doesn't error when it can't connect to the management cluster. So we'll just exit. And if it exits without an error code, systemd won't restart it on its own. So you have to put restart always to force it at the moment. So that I think it should probably return an error code if it's exiting because it can't connect or some other error. That was a little minor thing. Yeah, so we're going to start that. So let's take a look again at. So we don't have. Oh, wrong way. So like I said earlier, on that OneNode, can I spell anything today? We don't have Cluster API installed. We don't have the CRDs installed. So things are not going to go super well immediately. That's all part of the plan. Right, provision clone machines. That's the one we want. Okay, so we've started the bring your own host provider on those. So if we go back to that one of those machines, we do journal CTL FU on own host. So this is just constantly restarting. So yeah, so this bring your own host agent is connecting to that management cluster, and it looks like it's trying to create a CRD called bring your own host. Is that right?
Yep, it registers itself as a BYOH CRD. So we have defined a bunch of CRDs. Like if I have to draw parallel with vSphere, right? For every vSphere cluster, you have a BYO cluster. For a vSphere machine, you have a BYO machine. And for a vSphere VM, you have the BYO host. So this acts as a BYO host, and it registers itself as a CRD. Yeah. And you see this error because we don't have BYO host provider registered, and it doesn't recognize what this is.
Yeah. So eventually this will time out and systemd will stop starting it. So there is another change I could do to the systemd unit to just make this start forever. But let's make this slightly healthier, I suppose. So I do it as a new tab. Let's do that as a new tab, I think. TGI, new own host. Right. So we want to do. We need to install Cluster API, I suppose, on this machine. So I thought my computer crashed for a second. Right. So I've in my little demo environment for today, I do have a symlink just to make life a bit easier for me. So symlink the .cluster API directory to this cluster API config directory here because we need to use cluster couple. So do I have that installed here? I do. What version is this? That's the 100. Brew. I think it's in Homebrew, isn't it? So there we go. Let me delete this old one. No, that is. I think the version 100 is going to work anyway. So anyway, so it should be fine. We need to create a cluster couple. So what do we have? So we have cluster couple config repositories. Yeah, there you go. So hard coded in cluster couple is links to various repositories that include different providers. So that bring your own host is new. It's in alpha, so it doesn't. We haven't yet added this to Cluster API, have we? I suppose. Is there a PR open?
Yep, we have opened a PR. I think that's merged, but it'll be available with 101.
Or 102, I suppose. Is that?
The next one.
So yeah, 102. Yeah.
Next one. Okay.
So it'll be either in 1.1 or 102, depending on which one you hit. So we need to hack it into Cluster Couple right now. So fortunately, Cluster Couple lets you override with your own configurations. We do all of this in the end-to-end testing anyway. You can do this on your local environment. It's also what we're doing inside downstream products. So those who are using Tanzu Community Edition, you can see in the open source repos like our own versions of this that then have our downstream builds of it, which are the same as the upstream, just the only difference is they're signed by VMware. But otherwise, same. So we are going to do that. And I just got a meeting invite for a meeting in 10 minutes. That is not going to happen. Sorry, folks, to whoever that was.
But it's a no meeting Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have no meeting Fridays at VMware, or at least our bit of VMware does. So, yeah, which is good. And we are hiring, so there is that going on. Specifically, we are hiring someone in Europe, anyone in Europe to work on Cluster API. So do reach out. And I am also looking for a product manager for AWS. So if either of those interest you, reach out to either of us. Reach out to me on the AWS stuff, but reach out to either of us on the Cluster API stuff.
So we are hiring too in India. So if you are interested to work on bring your own host provider and a lot of cool edge related technologies, yep, reach out to me.
Cool. Right, so I think that's it, isn't it? I just need to post that in clustercouple.yaml. That's right. So let's check that. So I always forget to do. Yeah, there we go. So we have a bring your own host provider added to the repository. So now we can do. Can I do this off memory alone? Maybe. So there we go. Hopefully that will work. I don't have the world's fastest internet, so it might be a while. And other thing, I removed the taint on my one node cluster. That's that's wrong. That's a local client cluster. I do have blah running. What? How have I done that? Experiment from another day. Right. Yeah, that's working fine. Hello from Kansas City, Deshaun. Bit early, isn't it? Nice of you to join us in TGI Europe. Right. So we now have. Let's close that. Let's just have a single screen. No, using a lower resolution than normal. So. Yeah, you've got the core Cluster API controller. It's the bring your own host. Sean is blaming Keith. Should have a word.
4 a.m. Amazing.
4 a.m. This is being recorded, so you can come this later, you know. Anyway, if you do need to go back to sleep, especially Thanksgiving. It's like Thanksgiving, post-Thanksgiving Day. Or you're getting up for sales, maybe. Maybe it's Black... I haven't looked at the Black Friday sales. Right. Where were we? Yes, so so it might have timed out systemd. Oh, in your own host. There we go.
BYOH, yeah.
Oh, okay. So systemd did not time out on this machine. So maybe we should go back to our machine and see what just happened there on there. So we have so after we installed the Cluster API components, we ended up with the CRD definition. Yeah, well, all it is space. Yeah, API. Everyone loves to read these. It must be, yeah. So got if we're going to look at the machine, right? So previously it was just crash looping because it couldn't find any. Went back up. We didn't have any. Well, first of all, it wasn't the cluster wasn't running, so we turned. Oh no! So it was crash looping for ages. Yeah. So no matches for kind. Bring your own host. Once the CRDs got installed, at some point in time, the CRD was installed and it tried to create a resource. And that failed because the bring your own host provider wasn't running yet. So it was still crash looping. So if you're using validation webhooks and they're mandatory, then the webhooks need to be running before you can do anything with the resource. And then at some point it was able to create the resource after some time, and then that succeeded. So right now this is running, I think, isn't it? So this is still running. Active running. It's been running for 2 minutes, so it's not crash looping anymore. It's using 11 megs RAM. There you go. So let's have a look at one of these. Also, I've not looked in massive detail, so maybe you can walk me through some of this. No, right out. We take one of these hosts.
We can look at the logs first of one of the hosts.
Oh, why I just called it that. Anyway. Yeah, so we've created this machine registered itself. So what so there's no spec. So is there any spec usually on this bring your own host, or is it always just empty?
Yeah, for now I think it's empty. There's nothing on it.
And we have these conditions. So I take it then
So we have this one type called Kate's node bootstrap succeeded. This is like after you install Kubernetes and kubeadm, everything, it will go into a true state. Until then, if you see the reason waiting for machine ref to be assigned, right? So like I said, it just registers the BYO host in the capacity pool, like the list of BYO hosts that you saw, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the capacity pool. Now it's just waiting there for a machine to be assigned. So this machine is equivalent to a vSphere machine or a BYO machine. So this is created by the machine deployment part of Cluster API. It spins up new BYO machines, which then gets attached to this. So at the moment, we have not created any BYO machine, or we have not created any machine deployment. That's why you see this is just waiting there for something to happen to that BYO host.
Cool. And then we have some network information. So we've got a list. I take we enumerate each network adapter. So I take it you've got code that will skip over LO, I suppose, or
Yeah,
how
we
does that
have
work?
code that will look at the network interface name, that is ENS192. So this is mainly because we use kubevip for our control plane IP, that is for load balancing. We need to be able to identify the default interface to attach the kubevip to. So that is where we record this information, the
Cool.
network interface name.
Yeah, so we've got 4 hosts. So I take it in a capacity pool is any number of BYO hosts that exist in the namespace.
Yeah.
Do you have the ability
Yeah.
to register against different namespaces then?
For now, we're just using one, so
Okay.
could be possible like later something to try out.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the CRD definition, I mean, the YAML, right? Like, there's nothing in the YAML that says this could be a control plane node or a worker node. That's why I think even there was a question: can you pick hosts? This is why you cannot pick hosts. Everything looks the same.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it might be. Don't know how you would do that. So yeah, it'd be interesting. So
So
you might
one
want the
thing
ability to
is,
label hosts and use some sort of label selector, I suppose.
yeah. So at the moment, like when you are starting the PY host as a service, right? So you just provided the kubeconfig argument. So you can add labels also. So suppose say you have site A and site B, you could attach site labels or attach labels saying, hey, make this your control plane node. So at the moment we can attach labels, but uh, the state in which it is currently, we are not acting on those labels. We do not have any logic to parse the labels as of now. But that is a good way to plug in saying, pick this host for a control plane node.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to figure out is like who should have access to set the labels, so to speak. Because yeah, I think it's something you probably want to think about is what is the security boundary of all these things. So you're giving a machine I mean, obviously for the purposes of quick start, we're giving it the admin kube config, so it has access to the entire management cluster. But what would it look like to lock this down per se? So could you if it can register and know bring your own host today, presumably it can also register as a different bring your own host to what it says it is, just by having I could manually use the kube config to do something. So what would it look like? I think it's something to think about, like as we move forward with
Yeah.
other bits in Cluster API. It's not alone in this. There's other areas of Cluster API that have similar issues. As Scott, for instance, is well aware. But I think these are things we need to think about a bit more.
Yeah. Yep. Config file passed to the agent. True. I think one thing like I just explored was about node discovery, or I forget what it is called. Node feature discovery. Yes. So that probably tells you what your the CPU is, how much RAM do you have. So yeah, we were also looking into it, but not, yep, not nailed down what approach to take.
Yeah, and I think in the future we were certainly in the original plans for all this, we were looking at maybe using something like Spiffy or Spire to provide node attestation, so you can actually have a provable identity of the machine. So then you can't just say,
Right.
I am actually the control plane machine. Please provision me. So you will be able to have that tighter security. So Yeah, if you're screaming at me using the admin kube config, just for the purposes of this, I take it we could have provisioned one service account kube config which only has permissions to bring your own host resource, right? They don't touch any other. Does the agent look at any other resource?
So the agent only watches the resource that it registered.
Okay.
I think it filters out of all the BYO. Since we have given the management cluster access, it can definitely get hold of any BYO host it wants. But it's like a workaround that we're doing, that we are just filtering to watch the host that it registered.
Yeah, we'll take a look as we go along. So next step in this kube, this thing is creating a workload cluster. So the examples here are for doing it in Docker. So we can go past all this. Oh yeah, by the way, on that template, I had installed these things. So these are prerequisites for kubeadm today. I guess in the future, you can bake that in as well and just have those install, I suppose. Don't even need to do that then. Yeah, so we've got our hosts registered, so we are ready to do that. So we need the control plane endpoint. That control endpoint will not work in my environment, so we'll need to use a different one. Switch. So my network is 192.168, 192.61. I think that is free. Check. So I know the low numbers are not in the DHCP pool, so it should be safe unless I already got a cluster running. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I want to talk about why we're using 122.3 specifically, because right now how BY is structured is that the agent, so we have a component called the BYO host agent installer. So this installer is responsible for given OS, that is Ubuntu 2004 that we have, and given a Kubernetes version, it installs all those Kubernetes binaries onto this host. So how does it, I mean, where does it get from these binaries? So for a given OS and a K8s version, we have defined OCI bundles. So these are nothing but Carvel image package OCI bundles or images. So if you just look at one of the existing image, right, it just contains kubelet, kubectl, kubeadium, Debian files, and containerd, tar, and probably if you have specific configuration that you want to pass in, you could do that as well. But right now, what we provide by default is Kubernetes 1.22.3. That's why you see for the first part of the demo, we will be using 1.22.3, because we don't want to break anything right now. We could play with later.
Fair enough. So we'll see this live in a minute. I not used most of the Carvel tools apart from YTT. I think there's probably people in chat who know it much better than I do. So yeah, it's using this image package bundles. We'll see in a minute. So that's what have I done with all my? Where's all my windows gone? Don't move to the wrong desktop. Okay. Oh, just give me a moment. Why has it done that? Oh no. It's all gone a bit funny. Just give me a moment. I've lost all my windows. Including the screen recording. Gonna reset one of my extensions for GNOME. There we go. Right. I am using a out of maintenance.
Yep, image package is awesome and allows for air gapped. I think it's image package is super powerful in that you could build your own OCI images, move them across registries, and then like if you have an air gap system, SEP it into your system and then push it into a private registry and use from there. So yeah, pretty powerful.
Yeah, just give me a moment whilst I sort out my desktop. What has happened here? Oh, okay. Come back. Right. Share my screen again. Yeah. And as Scott says, image package awesome and allows for air gap. Yes. Incredibly important for a lot of our customers. Right. So, yeah, so I had a funny moment there. Let's have a look at this cluster template that we generated. So we've got a kubeadm config template. Do I need cgroup driver? If I'm on a real machine, do I need cgroup fs or systemd? I think I need systemd, don't I?
Yep. You can probably remove that line by default. I think kubeadm
Yeah,
post 1.22 uses systemd.
yeah. I probably don't even need this, but it doesn't matter, I guess.
I'm surprised why your cluster YAML has that. I thought we fixed this. Okay.
Doesn't matter really. It's not going to hurt it, is it?
It probably will,
Oh,
because your kubelet will say, "Hey, I don't know what you're talking about."
right, cool. Yeah, right, fine. CRS true. Right, so you've got
Did you
that.
just take out cgroup fs or the entire kubelet outs?
I took out the whole thing. Yeah, I don't think I need any of it really.
What does eviction hard do? I'm not very sure.
I think it controls when pods will be evicted if there's certain problems with the computer, as in like it's run out of disk space or stuff like that. So I think this is more for the Docker environment. You kind of need
Okay.
this sometimes because it can't read it properly, I think, when it's nested, but we're not running nested. We're running as a normal computer. So I don't think we need any of this. So I think I'll just remove it. Let's see what happens. Changing things live. That's always fun. Why is it complaining? RKE. This is not Rancher. Leave me alone. We're using Cluster API, not Rancher. Stop assuming. That's interesting. Right. Yeah, so normal pod CIDR blocks. Technically, that would be bad. So let's change that. Because it will clash with my network. Oh, not 8. Sorry, 16. So we're going to have one. We could change that later in a minute. So standard Cluster API. So maybe for those who aren't familiar with Cluster API, maybe I'll just walk through that quickly. So we have a cluster resource. So this is a core Cluster API resource, independent of different infrastructures. Mostly we have a little bit like the common sort of networking information. Then we have a control plane ref. So this is where you specify what provider you're using for various things. So we have you can plug in your own control plane provider. So there's a core one based on kubeadm, and then the most common ones are there's ones for like Talos, which is a different sort of bootstrapping system, and then for yes there is, and then for the managed services, say EKS on Amazon or AKS on Azure, you can plug that out with your managed control plane provider. And then we've got infrastructure ref, and we're going to use. So you have like a type of cluster. We're going to have a bring your own cluster type of cluster. Go for in a minute. Machine deployments. This is another generic core Cluster API type. So this is your equivalent of deployments with pods. It's just the machine-based equivalent. So again, we have a template referencing templates. So we're using kubeadm and the bring your own machine template. kubeadm control plane. Don't need host.docker internal, I don't think. That's fine, I suppose. Doesn't really matter. do I need? Don't need host path provisioner. You do want kuberip. So kuberip is what we're using to make a highly available control plane. Even though in this case we're only using a single node, but we need a stable endpoint of some sort. And then we have some workarounds for Docker again, which I can probably get rid of. Don't need them. You don't actually need to turn off swap, turns out. So, oh, we do want the second one, I suppose. You can turn off the swap free flight because I've disabled that. I can get rid of these because I don't need them. And we can get rid of that. We probably want a template that isn't Docker specific, I guess, in the repo. Probably be a thing we should have.
Yeah.
And then we have your bring your own cluster stuff. That's the control plane endpoint that we provided, so that's what kuberip is going to set up for us. Question from
So on line 151 and 2 that you see bundle lookup, right? So this is the OCI bundle that we'll be referring to. So this is the Harbor registry that we have posted on.
Why don't we have a look at that? So how do I pull that down locally? Do I do image?
Yeah, I need to have image package. Yep, okay, you do an image package pull -i. You need, I think it's a parameter to pass. Yep.
And then the tag is it?
You need the name of it. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's just the tag. It's nothing. You'll need the name of the image. I could probably send it to you because it's a pretty long name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you want to use? Yes, use the private chat. There we go. Right. So what do I need to fix in this line here?
So after bring your own host, put a slash.
Yeah.
And the BYOH bundle that I passed. So 010 is the tag part.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And then the tag.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is how we name a bundle. BYOH bundle is a common prefix. So Ubuntu 2004.1. So this is specifically built for 2004.1 and Kate's 122.3. Okay. I need to probably say. Oh, what is wrong with this image package? Did you add the tag?
Oh, what tag do I?
It's V010. You have missed the V part of it in the tag.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
There you go. And what's my output? Like, is it just a tar file that I'm downloading? What is it?
Yes. So yeah, if you untar it now, probably you'll see a lot of Kubedium Debian files.
It maybe whilst that's happening, so that's just more for my own interest. We can deploy this. So if we got, let's have journal CTL running.
Yeah, I think Scott's right. It'll be a folder and not a tar.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Right. So we have, I guess that's. We've got the containerd tar file, Debian packages, which are going to get installed directly. And that's comp.tar. Oh, okay. We've got the stuff we want to unpack in etcd. Etsy, not etcd, Etsy. I have noticed this issue where people keep referring to /etc directories as /etcd now. Too much etcd on the brain. Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, you kind of need these for KubeADM to be successful. Yeah, so that's what that is. So I think I mentioned I did do these on my one node machine previously. So that's that. Right. Right, so we're ready to apply the manifest now. We've got our machine here. Hopefully it won't explode after my hacky changes just now.
Let's see.
And that's all happy. So what's changed here? Machine ref, so something's happened. Machine ref not yet set happened. So
it was at that state, machine ref not yet set. So probably like in a bit we should start seeing Kubernetes being installed.
Oh, what's the cluster name? Right, so we've got waiting for infrastructure. So we're waiting for full plane machine, are we?
Yeah.
So this is standard Cluster API resource, and so this would have been templated out by the core Cluster API components, and it would have created a bring your own machine type. So let's have a look at that one. Waiting for a bootstrap data secret. So how is a host related to, how's a bring your own host linked to a bring your own machine? How does that work? How does it choose?
So it just chooses one of the available hosts. It picks at random one of them. Right now we have 4. And once it picks one of it, on the BYOH CRD, you have the status field, right? So we have defined status.machineref. So that's where you can see the BYO machine being referenced in a BYOH status field.
Oh, so it will pick on which resource will have the machine ref?
On a BYO host.
Ah, okay.
There's no machine ref on this, so probably this is not the host that is selected, because this still says waiting for machine ref to be assigned.
Ah, okay. I think when I tried it last night, it just picked one. So I thought it was, it picks in alphabetical order, so that's easy, but it doesn't. So that's good. So let's pop onto this machine then, I suppose, instead of looking at this one, which is not doing anything, it's not selected. For those who are wondering, I only ignore the SSH warnings on this particular subnet. That's not how I connect to everything on the internet. So don't try and man in the middle me. Right, we can have a look at. I keep spelling journal CTL wrong. There we go. Right, so we can see from this that let's get the whole logs. So we get that. So this was restarting for ages. So we can see. Let's go up a bit.
I think we can pick from the point of waiting for machine ref and see what happened after that.
Yeah, I use Nano. Leave me alone. At least for the purposes of this. Who can be bothered learning how to exit VI? Yeah, so I think the system D would have stopped restarting at around 2:55, I think. So that's what. So we got in there in time. So we had the staff. Yeah, so round about here. Yeah. Oh no.
So this is doing all the Kubernetes stuff.
Oh, so it's oh right, okay. It's not many logs. Yeah, cool. Right. Pretty quickly after the. Yeah, so we have the installer downloading the bundle, I suppose. Yeah. And then it starts. Let's make that a bit smaller, actually. Is that okay for people? Yeah, if it's too small. Preparing to unpack the Debian bundles. Yeah, so it's just doing stuff like that. And is that finished? Yeah, Kate's node successfully bootstrapped. So if we go back here, look, Kate's component installation succeeded.
We could also probably look at the machine resource.
Yeah.
Because we'll see a provider ID being attached to it.
Sorry, which one are we looking for?
The provider ID.
Oh yes, that's right. So we've got
BYOH,
provider ID.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how is the provider ID generated?
So right now this is the host name followed by / random 6-digit 6-character string. Yeah.
Nice. There you go.
So once a provider ID is being attached to a machine, it means the bootstrap, everything is successful and it has joined the cluster.
Yeah. So we can now get our config for that cluster. What's it called again? Is it? Yes, that one. Yeah, I actually one suggestion, you can probably update the quick start to just use this, since the user's already going to have to install cluster cuttles to do other stuff. That probably simplifies getting the kube config.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a one machine control plane. Do we have the other machine being provisioned? Oh, I'm wrong. Keep doing that. Exit that. Oh, I've messed something up.
Oh,
There you go. Knew that was. What
in the
did I
machine
do wrong?
deployment.
Something in the machine deployment I screwed up. I think maybe. Oh,
You need to have an empty spec at least, I guess, then.
yeah, I think so. Oh, no, we do have one. Yeah, we need an empty spec. That's interesting. Wasn't. That's probably Cluster A. Maybe might need to check with Fabrizio whether or not that should just work. Right? I think that's right.
Mm-hmm. Spec template spec. Is that how it goes?
Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Created machine. All right. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
There we go. So that's doing what you should be doing. Right. Today I learned. Don't just expect it to work. But I should probably find out if that's deliberate, because maybe you should just default that if you enter it. Yeah. Right. So that is a cluster. So one thing was, so I'm just interested. So what I'm gonna do now is, you can talk me through some of this. So, we haven't done any deletion. So let's wait for that machine to come up, and then I want to try deletion. But whilst that's doing, I do want to, what's my browser? Check out this repo. Right. So, ooh. Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, code. Oh, I see. You ship a configuration. It's interesting. It's cool. Yeah, just interested. So that script you have. So if I wanted to add like a Fedora thing, how would I go about doing that?
Yeah. So, um first of all, you need to install all the Kubernetes binaries yourself because, like we
Okay.
saw, the one we pulled from Harbor was for Ubuntu 2004 and K8s 1.22.3. So if you see in the agent folder, right, on top,
Yep.
there's something called the installer.
Yep.
So this is actually responsible for even if you have to build a bundle. Right now, we are using the bundle builder folder that you see there inside the installer.
Right. Yes.
So there's a couple of shell scripts that uh, pulls in all these kubadm whatever version you want and then builds a bundle, and then the push bundle will push to whatever registry you want. So we just have a couple of shell scripts over here, and then if you see there's a CLI for this. It's a basic CLI wherein you can see which OS is supported, and uh, you can have a preview of the bundle install. So we will not actually go and install everything. We'll just show that this will get installed. It's just a preview instead of actually executing the step for you.
Okay.
and then you see internal and algo, right?
Yeah.
So if we can go into Ubuntu 2004.
Yeah.
So these are the set of do and undo commands that we have defined. So these are the steps that need to be done on Ubuntu and for this
Okay.
Skates version. So once, so that entire bunch of logs that we saw for installing Kubelet, Kubedium, it just performs all of these in series. So as and when we want to add more support to other OSs and Kubernetes versions, we'll need to have more of these steps defined.
Okay.
So right now, if you want to try it on Fedora, probably what we could do is, can you go to the main agent folder and look at its main.go?
Yeah.
Yeah, so scroll down a bit, a little bit more. Yep, the flags over here. Scroll up.
Oh. Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you see on line 90, the skip installation. So if you provide this flag when you start the agent itself, we will not go through the installer workflow. We'll assume that everything Kubernetes prerequisites are set up. We will directly go to the Kubedium step,
Yeah.
the Kubedium init or join. So yeah, you'll have to do all the installation part and use this flag. So
Yeah.
for probably if you want to try for Fedora, we could try this out.
Yeah. I'm not sure I've got. Well, we might be able to. Yeah. So I think what we. Yeah. Actually,
Oh,
whatever
and
works with Fedora will actually work for Photon as well. So,
okay.
because it should be mostly the same. So, I mean, it's basically what we
See.
have is Debian versus Red Hat family,
Mhm.
right? So those are the two different ones. So
Yeah.
Ubuntu
And
is Debian
probably
family.
when we are building the host agent itself, right? So we have a top level make file.
Yep.
Um, so there, one of the targets is make host agent binaries, search for host agent binaries.
Yes.
Yep. So if you see, this is saying architecture is Linux and AMD 64.
Yeah.
Right? So if you build it for other architectures like ARM, so we've had William Lamb who had tried this out on ARM, and he has published a blog and he was able to successfully get a workload cluster on ARM architecture as well.
Nice.
So that is, yeah, if anybody's interested, could try out.
Cool. Yeah. So I think I'm not sure I've got the wherewithal to do anything today. But yeah, I think it'd be pretty good to try create. So I guess what we would do, we would. So we got this. Let's have a look. Just have a think about what we would do. So we have these apt steps. I guess we would create a RPM step, I suppose, or DNF step to cover. Deshaun also says using ARM642. So yeah, I think okay, cool. So this looks starting to look a bit similar to say something like an older config management tool like Puppet, it says, or something like Ansible, where you're defining in Go, how to do a certain type of operation. Importantly, I think this is the thing that the older config management tools didn't have, is how to undo them as well. Like that was always a challenge, like how to, when you were doing Puppet back in the day, which is why we then eventually went to the immutable infrastructure, because it was easier to reason about than trying to undo a package installation and read it. I mean, that's basically why we had Kubernetes, I suppose, in the end, because it was too difficult to reason about. But I think for
And
the
it is
minimal,
easier to spin up new machines, right? Like,
yeah,
yep.
yeah, and given that so I think, well, it's back in the day, like you would do. I mean, an example would be you'd spin up, for my old job, you'd spin up a machine and then install OpenLDAP and generate TLS certificates and then install Jenkins in the node. But then what if someone tried to remove Jenkins? How do you uninstall it again? So that was all really complicated. So that's why we started containerizing things. But I guess in this instance, we're only interested in the very small set of things that we need to do to get Kubernetes working. So we don't need all of the complexity of the older config management tools. Like we don't need a Puppet server with millions of different resources. We only need just enough to install Kubernetes and get going, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I think what would be, because I'm interested in something like this for Tanzu Community Edition that we have everywhere, not just in a, not just for bring your own host, but like some ability to configure the machines better. Because I think those of you who are using Tanzu Community Edition, you know, you're doing a lot of YTT overlays and to configure the machine and setting files, etc. And you can see that in the Tanzu framework. It would be nice to be able to replace that with something a bit more structured in Go and be cool to see what that looks like. So that's something I'm playing around with a bit. So this really looks interesting to me. Yeah, and something I definitely want to play with. Yeah, so I guess let's, I don't think, I'm probably not, I have not slept well, so I don't think I'm ready to program today, but I did not get around to deleting the machine. So what would be the best, if I deleted that workload, host?
Let's see if the machine got a provider ID first.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just confirm.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Okay.
Actually, just for completeness sake, let's install Antria. Got CNI. Hopefully I didn't mess up the pod CIDR thing, so it actually works. Wait for that to finish and then delete.
I think one of the interesting questions that Scott asked was, can BYOH and CatV be used together to allow for VM and bare metal nodes in the same cluster? I think it's one of the very interesting use cases where the BYOH provider can allow for mix and match of different infrastructures, right? But right now, if you want to like try it out, the constraint being they have to be on the same network. We have not solved the problem of when, you know, it gets disconnected from the management cluster or the different nodes are on different networks. But definitely, like, could be one of the future use cases because that is an interesting problem.
Yeah, they just need to be routed together, right? They don't need to be exactly on the same subnet. So you could have like an AWS internet-facing cluster and then do that. I think the one you're talking about is what happens when you turn the machines off, which is a problem in Cluster API today. I think that's, yeah. So a lot of people doing that in Edge, I guess. Telco, I guess.
Yeah. I think the machine health check, everything kicks in and says, okay, this probably is dead and starts spinning up new one, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go. So we have stuff running now. So there we go. So that's a running cluster now. So yeah. So let's, I guess, delete that. So that's machine 04. So let's jump on that machine again. We should create some. Maybe I should create some static entries. Oh, it's done that thing with the windows again. Oh no. I should probably find out what key combination is causing this to screw up. Okay. Increment. Like slightly quicker this time. Should probably figure out what's causing that to happen. Right, we were going to jump onto that machine, weren't we? So I'm going to cheat and just go get it from Reese here. So trying to look through YAML. Okay. Right, so we're going to delete this machine.
But if you delete the machine, isn't machine deployment just going to spin up a new one?
I think that's fine. I just want to see how
Okay.
the cleanup. We'll cause the cleanup to happen on this, though, won't it? Or will it not?
Yep, it will.
Yeah, I don't mind it picking another machine. I just want to see. I did not do that properly. There you go. Oh, that's interesting. So, how do we get the QADM configuration over to the machine?
Yep. So I believe initially we get it to the BYO machine via a Bootstrap data secret. So we copy that data secret from BYO machine to a field on the BYO host. So we just copy that over. Yep.
Interesting.
So we have tried and minimized that the BYO host shouldn't be getting BYO machine objects or a BYO cluster object, any CRD from the management cluster. So we try and copy as many fields or annotate the BYO host with, say, hey, this should be your Kubernetes version.
Yeah.
Yep, it has gone back to machine ref not yet set state.
Cool. So that just, as you saw in this code, we got each of those steps as an undo. So it's just run through the undo for each of those. That's pretty cool. That's pretty nice. Yeah, so if I look at the bring your own host for the remaining, which one was that? 03. Oh, not 30. Don't have that many. Ah, right, and you're still doing some stuff on annotations. Yeah, it's got the Bootstrap secret. Cool. So does the agent then download the secret? Or do you copy the contents of the secret?
Yep. Yep, we copy the content, I guess. Yes.
Oh, okay. And then you remove it after it's succeeded, or is it?
I'm not sure the cleanup we are doing or not. I don't remember.
Okay.
We can probably look at the code for it.
That's cool. I think that's everything I wanted to know today. Are there any questions we've got? Yeah, Darmjit was saying we could filter on. We do have ability to attach labels, and we could use that for filtering later. Yeah, Scott, you've answered it. Yeah. Any other questions folk have in the audience? As ever, if you like this, as a typical YouTube outro, you know, if you like this video, click on the like button and then click on subscribe and then change the bell to get all notifications for future TGIK episodes instead of just the personalized recommendations. God knows what the AI algorithm for that is. So yeah, comment, like, and subscribe. And we're not actually making money from this, so you know. But anyway, it would be nice if you do that. If you don't like it, don't use thumbs down, but maybe leave us a comment. If you can leave a comment to say what we can improve, definitely, and or reach out to us. As we mentioned earlier, we are hiring. We're hiring Cluster API folk in both Europe and India, so do reach out. So, anything else you want to say, Anusha?
So, a provider is public. It's just few weeks old that it's public. So if it would be great if you guys could try it out, and if you see any gaps, be it documentation or working or feature ideas, feel free to log issues. And yep, looking forward for the collaboration.
Cool. Thanks for your time, Anusha. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Naadir.
I hope you enjoyed a
I
new
did.
time, and I hope it's been all right for everyone. We'll see you soon. And happy Thanksgiving for those who are celebrating.
And happy
Bye.
week. Bye bye.